You remember the eyes, don't you? Not their color, no, that detail never mattered. It was the way they looked through you, as if she already knew the ending and was simply watching your body arrive at it. You spoke. She smiled, but the smile didn't belong to you. It belonged to something else, something older, something that had worn 1,000 masks before yours ever entered the room. There was a moment fleeting, so brief you weren't sure it even happened, when her expression shattered for just a breath. A look, not of love, not of fear, but recognition, as if you weren't a man at all, but an echo she had met many lifetimes ago. You dismissed it, of course. You always do. You called it intuition, or madness, or seduction, but it still lingers. That glimpse behind the veil, that cold familiarity, that feeling you were never speaking to her, only to the mask, and that the mask had been speaking back since before you were born. You thought she was mysterious, but what if she was precise? What if her ambiguity was your mirror? She never lies, she performs a prophecy tailored to your weakness. She speaks in riddles because you don't deserve clarity. You never did. You demanded beauty instead of truth, charm instead of cruelty, softness instead of strength. And so, she gave you what you worshipped. Her words were not lies, they were designs. And you mistook design for confusion, manipulation for mystery. But beneath it all, she saw through you. She calculated how much of yourself you would willingly betray just to hear the answer you secretly wanted. And she gave it, with perfect timing, with surgical softness, not out of love, but out of instinct. You thought she was unsure, that she didn't know what she wanted, that her signals were mixed, her feelings vague, her words contradictory. But that was only because you heard her through the filter of your hunger. A man in heat can't understand symbols, and she is made of them. She doesn't speak to be understood. She speaks to provoke, to distort, to see what breaks in you when the words don't align. She is not a teacher. She is an experiment. And you are her variable. You blamed her when your fantasies collapsed. But did she promise them? Or did you build them from her silences? You filled her pauses with dreams. You called her mystery a sign of depth. You called her coldness a sign of trauma. You translated her ambiguity into poetry. And yet all she ever did was watch. She watched how fast you bent, how deeply you needed her to be more than a body, how you projected onto her the entire myth of feminine wisdom when all she gave you was a stare and a half smile. You say she lied, but she never said a word without your consent. You nodded before she spoke. You fantasized before she touched. You confessed before she asked. It was not deception, it was performance. And the audience was willing. She didn't twist your mind. You offered it. Because you wanted to be chosen. Because you were still that little boy at the edge of the playground, hoping the goddess would notice you. You didn't want a woman. You wanted an oracle. And oracles don't speak plainly. You forget she doesn't speak in logic. She speaks in tone, in pace, in flickers of movement. The rhythm of her sighs tells you more than her vocabulary. Her delay in responding is her answer. Her silence is a test. And you, desperate for coherence, rush to fill the gap. But the moment you interpret, she already knows. She's not hiding her meaning, she's watching yours. Her game is not clarity, it's reflection. So what does it mean when a woman says one thing and does another? It means you still believe in words. You still cling to the childlike myth that truth is delivered through grammar. That if you study long enough, interpret hard enough, she will unfold like a book. But she is not a book. She is a mirror curved, cracked, ancient, and your logic was never the right tool. You must lose your need to understand, or she will keep performing until you forget your own name. The tragedy is not that women deceive. The tragedy is that men deceive themselves and then cry betrayal. You knew. You always knew. There was a look in her eyes before she kissed you, a hesitation before she said, "I love you," a flicker of contempt when you confessed your soul. You felt it, but you buried it, because the dream was more delicious than the truth, because the mask gave you permission to pretend. And now you resent her for breaking the illusion when you were the one who clung to it most. You were never seduced by her body. You were seduced by your own projection dancing on her face. That's the real mask, the one you placed upon her, the one stitched from your mother's silence, your lover's cruelty, your ache for salvation. You wrapped her in it like a goddess, then cursed her for being human. But she never asked to be a symbol. She simply moved like one, and your hunger did the rest. There is no such thing as mixed signals, only mixed expectations. You expected a language of honesty. She spoke in the dialect of survival. You demanded a compass. She offered a storm, and when you got lost, you cursed her. But she was never the map. She was the terrain, shifting, alive, indifferent. And you were just another wanderer, insisting that the mountain explain itself before you dared to climb. She told you everything. You just didn't hear it. In the way she looked away when you were vulnerable. In the way her voice got sweeter when you questioned her intentions. In the way her affections surged after your indifference and vanished after your loyalty. Those were not contradictions. Those were signals, not of feeling but of leverage. She is not evil. She is adaptive. And in a world that taught her that safety is earned through performance, why wouldn't she become a master of masks? You want her to be innocent, or honest, or pure. But why? So you can rest. So you don't have to grow claws, so you can hide again in the fantasy that women are sacred and men are beasts. The truth is uglier. She's a beast too. A beautiful, ritualized, camouflaged beast. And if you look closely, really closely, you'll see it. In the precision of her flirtation, in the way she weaponizes softness, in how her gentleness always arrives when you're about to leave. You thought love would liberate you, but it was only a different kind of trap, a mirror trap, one where you speak to yourself through the mouth of another, one where the mask you desire most is the one that kills you slowest. And she knows it. She knows your weakness for symbols, your addiction to feminine grace, your need to be chosen, not for your strength, but for your wounds. And she plays the part until you forget it was a play. She never meant what she said because you never meant what you heard. You wanted comfort, she offered power. You wanted answers, she offered paradox. You wanted her, but she was never really there. Just a presence shaped by your expectations, animated by your fears, and vanishing the moment you looked too closely. So here you are, alone again. Not because she betrayed you, but because you demanded truth from an oracle, when all she ever promised was a mask. Every gesture you called love was a negotiation masked as devotion. She never entered the stage alone. You were always part of the play. You just didn't know it. You mistook the curtains for sincerity, the spotlight for intimacy, the applause in your chest for truth. But you were never witnessing love you were auditioning. Every moment you thought was sacred was a scene. Every smile was a cue. Every silence, a test. You believed you were building something with her, brick by brick. But she was constructing something else, a fortress, a stage, a throne, and you were just the scaffolding. You called it vulnerability. She called it leverage. You offered your history, your pain, your father's absence, your endless need to be seen, and she took it all, nodded sweetly, stored it somewhere dark behind her ribs like ammunition, Not out of cruelty, not even out of manipulation, but because it was useful to know your soft spots, to know what you hope she sees, and more importantly, to know what you cannot stand to see in yourself. You said you wanted real love, but you only wanted worship. You wanted to be chosen not for your masks, but for the trembling thing beneath them. But she wasn't looking for truth. She was looking for control. And in a world that uses women as currency, you thought she would be pure. No, she became a master of the transaction. She didn't trust you to love her unless you feared losing her. So she made herself scarce. She didn't trust your strength unless it begged for her softness. So she withheld. She learned the rules because she had to. And you, unaware, thought you were speaking soul to soul. But it was chess. And she moved first. You don't believe it. You can't. Because to admit that love is a negotiation ruins the myth you cling to, that someone out there will accept you entirely. But what is acceptance if not a tactic? When a woman tells you she loves your flaws, what she's really saying is, I've found the price you'll pay for my affection. And when you say you love her, what you really mean is, here is my peace. Take it. Just don't leave. It's not romance. It's hostage negotiation. She knew this long before you did. Not because she's evil, but because she watched men talk about love while staring at her body. She learned young that attention is not intimacy, that kindness is often a down payment for control, that behind every "you're special" is a "so, don't reject me." So she turned the game around. She became the prize, the mystery, the emotional maze, and you ran through it like a desperate animal, calling it destiny. You said she was hard to read, but the truth was written all over her, in the delay of her replies, in the way she praised you only after you pulled away, in the sudden affection after conflict. She didn't love like a river. She loved like a contract. If you behave, you receive warmth. If you falter, silence. She didn't speak from her heart, she spoke from a ledger. She remembered your every confession, your every contradiction, and filed them away for later use. Not because she's malicious, because it works. She asked about your childhood, didn't she? About your mother, your fears, your secret failures. You thought it meant she cared. But the truth is crueler. She needed access to your source code, because the more she understood your ghosts, the more she could haunt you with them. Not overtly, not with threats, but with subtle reenactments, with the same absence your mother gave you, with the same praise withheld, the same conditional warmth, until you folded thinking it was love again. And when she cried, when she finally broke, you thought this is real. You believed the performance ended. But no, that was the climax. That was the scene you were meant to remember. The moment you thought you saw her, and so you stayed. Again, and again, and again. Not for her, but for the version of you that got to be the hero, the savior, the man who could finally fix what every other man destroyed. But here's the twist she never wanted saving. She wanted power, and nothing gives a woman more power than a man addicted to the idea of rescuing her. She gave you just enough damage to activate your protector, just enough tragedy to awaken your purpose, and just enough affection to keep you guessing. And so you danced endlessly to music you didn't know she was conducting. Even her chaos was calculated, her jealousy, her withdrawal, her sudden confessions of emptiness, all of it served a purpose to keep you off balance. Because a man in control is dangerous, but a man in confusion is loyal. You couldn't leave not because of love, but because you didn't understand what was happening. You needed resolution, and she kept it just out of reach, like a cruel god dangling salvation. And when she spoke of her past, the betrayals, the heartbreaks, the wounds you opened even more, you said, "I'll never do that to you." But you didn't hear the warning. She was telling you what she expects, what she's prepared to punish you for before you've even sinned. It wasn't confession, it was psychological warfare, preemptive guilt. She loaded the gun, handed it to you, and dared you not to pull the trigger. And when you finally did, when you faltered, when you said the wrong thing, when you stopped performing, she didn't confront you. She vanished, not to heal, but to punish, to make your absence feel like death, to remind you that her attention is oxygen, and without it, you choke. And so you returned, not because of love, but because of withdrawal, like a dog crawling back to the master who taught him how to starve. And still, you call this love. You call it complicated, messy, deep. But deep is not the same as dark, and you are in the dark now, not because she abandoned you, but because she trained you to need her approval more than your own integrity. So now, every woman who follows will be a test. Every silence will feel like a threat. Every moment of vulnerability, a trap. And you'll wonder why you can't trust. But the truth is simple. You learned the truth too late. You learned that love is not an offering, it's a bid. And bids require leverage, and leverage requires masks. She never loved you, she negotiated with you. In the language of eyes, in the grammar of absence, in the punctuation of desire. And you signed the contract with your soul. Not because you were fooled, but because you were hoping to be. She does not deceive you, you are simply the one who wanted to be deceived. You say she betrayed you, that she misled you, that her words didn't match her actions. Her affection vanished the moment you gave her your loyalty. But what you can't admit is far simpler. She never had to lie, she just let you believe, and you did so willingly, so completely, so desperately that even now, in the silence, you still hope she meant it. But there is no mystery. You were never tricked. You offered yourself to the trick, because the lie she whispered was more beautiful than the truth you already knew. You knew, didn't you? Not logically, not with proof, but with that primitive ache behind your ribs. The one that flinched when her gaze slipped away mid-sentence. The one that stiffened when she laughed too long at another man's joke. The one that curled in on itself when she delayed her reply just enough to remind you you are not the center of her world. And still, you ignored it, because to confront it would mean killing the illusion. And you loved the illusion more than you ever loved her. You didn't want the truth. You wanted worship. You wanted a goddess who would reflect back your worth. And when she smiled, when she gasped, when she leaned her head into your chest, you felt chosen. But it wasn't you she responded to, it was the ritual, the performance, the pressure points you exposed so early, thinking you were being honest. But honesty, in her hands, is an equation. The more you reveal, the more she sees how to mold you. You thought your vulnerability would protect you, but it only gave her the blueprint for your collapse. And collapse you did. You gave her everything, your mind, your trust, your protection, your hunger, and she accepted it like a queen accepts tribute, not because she needs it, but because it reminds you who holds power. Every gift you gave her deepened your own illusion. You didn't notice the imbalance. You mistook the coldness for mystique. You rationalized her distance. You called it independence. You admired her restraint. You told yourself she's just not used to being loved. And yet, deep inside, you knew. You felt it, the invisible thread between you slackening, tightening, pulling, but never truly anchored. She never lied. She just responded. And you created the fantasy with your own hands. You wrote the script, cast her in the role, whispered the lines, then fell in love with the sound of your own voice echoing back in hers. The tragedy is not what she did, it's what you needed her to be. You needed her to heal your mother's silence, to reward your loyalty, to prove that a man who tries to love gently will not be punished. But life is not that merciful, and women, real women, are not that simple. What you mistook for love was just a mirror, not a mirror of truth, but of hunger. You saw yourself in her eyes, the version of you that was finally enough, and you chased that reflection, begged for it, bled for it, until the real woman behind the mask was irrelevant. She became the altar, and you became the offering. You think she hurt you, but she simply left. She left when the game no longer required her attention, when your obsession became predictable, when your certainty replaced the thrill of conquest. She didn't betray you. She withdrew her performance, and without the performance, you collapsed. Not because she disappeared, but because she no longer held the illusion together for you. This is what men do when they worship women. They mistake the play for the person. They forget that behind every perfectly timed smile, every trembling whisper of "I've never felt this before," is a calculation. Not because she's cruel, but because she has learned. She has watched what earns love, what earns protection, what earns obsession, and she has studied it more thoroughly than you have ever studied yourself. But you believed in her sincerity, not because of who she was, but because of what you needed. You wanted a witness, a lover, a home, and she played the part well until she didn't, until she grew bored, until your devotion became a leash instead of a chase. And now you say she was manipulative, that she used you, that she twisted your heart for her gain. But no, she simply followed the rhythm you set. You made her your salvation, and she became it. You offered your peace in exchange for a smile. She smiled, and you called it love. But it was not love. It was leverage. Every kiss, every caress, every late-night confession, they were trades. And she was always calculating the cost. Now you sit in the wreckage of that dream, and still you reach for her in memory. You try to make sense of it. You tell yourself, she changed, she became cold, she stopped caring, but she never changed. You just stopped hallucinating. You stopped interpreting her indifference as mystique. You stopped filtering her ambiguity through hope. And in the silence, you finally heard the truth: she was never yours. She doesn't lie. She adapts. She reflects. She provokes. And you were never trying to love her. You were trying to convince yourself you were lovable. And that's the deepest wound of all. Not that she left, but that she was never really there. Only a silhouette wearing the shape of your hunger. So now you rage. You call her names in your mind. You replay every scene, trying to find where it went wrong. But the truth isn't hidden. It's always been the same. You lied to yourself. You chose illusion. You chose meaning over clarity. You chose the myth of woman over the reality of her. And this is what Nietzsche tried to tell you. That love is not the highest virtue. That truth, stripped of its mask, is brutal. That those who worship woman must become slaves to their own projections. That the ideal, the divine feminine, the muse, the oracle is a trap. A beautiful, glittering trap forged from a man's refusal to stand alone. You wanted love to save you. It didn't. You wanted her to see you. She didn't. You wanted the story to mean something. It doesn't. And yet, even now, you hesitate. You want to believe this was an exception, that she was just one woman, that the next will be different, that real love awaits, just past this shadow. But listen carefully. That hope you hear, that's the mask, whispering again. That's the dream inviting you back to sleep. So look in the mirror, not the one you used to fix your hair, the real one, the blood-stained one, the one she left behind when she walked away. Look, and you will see not her, but yourself, the boy, the ache, the need, the lie, all of it. And maybe then you'll understand. She didn't deceive you. You deceived yourself because the lie felt safer than the truth. And now, the mask is yours. There is a mirror in the forest no one dares name. It does not reflect your face, only your hunger. They say, if you stare long enough, her face appears. But it's not her. It's every version of her you ever imagined, layered atop each other like fog on glass. She smiles, but the smile never reaches her eyes, because they're not hers. They're yours. And as you reach out again to touch what you think is love, the surface shatters, not into shards, but into silence. And in that silence, there is no woman, no betrayal, no meaning, only your own reflection, finally refusing to lie.